you may also like. A show about the things you may also like. Things like...
You know, Tracy, without really paying attention to life and how time goes by, and we're looking at, in the face of 2025, here you are, you've got 426 or more episodes that you have done of your show. How incredible is that?
Well, I have been nicknamed the queen of content. So I guess I do come by it naturally. I think I just have this interest for stories and able to dig things up and make, like a silk purse out of a sow's ear. That's a long time saying, but I think it's something that's been true to me.
Over that time period, how has your show changed? How has it evolved?
Well, that's an interesting question because actually I was just talking about the shows and what we've done and accomplished, and definitely saw a breakthrough during COVID when everybody was talking on this platform and Zoom and whatnot, and made us all feel connected. I think where I'm thinking more about where I want to go, and I think it's that next level of connectivity. What does that look like? I don't know. But I know now that there is something different out there that people are craving. And I think that it might be a combination of that, once again, being in person. But I think more important than that is to be able to talk about things that we just don't talk about. And that has been the hardest thing, I think, through this whole 5 years that I've been doing this, which the time has flown by. That's the hardest thing, I think, for me to figure out what that really is.
So talk to me about the pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Because you started 2018, 2019, and I remember I could go and see the show, and the show was going to be out and about town, and it was going to be here, it was there, it was literally everywhere. And then, you were forced to spend 2.5 years at home producing this stuff. And that's kind of where it's been for the last little while. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, you're on the cusp of something else. So tell me about going home to do the show.
Well, that was scary. But I think what made it easier, if that's for a lack of a better word, easier, is because we were all in it. And then remember that phrase, we're all in it together. Though as time went on, we realized, no, we're not really all in it together. But we did navigate through it, and it became easy. And I'm sure yourself doing your show, wow, I can just go downstairs, or I could, it's not like I have to be up at this time, drive to this location, set up, blah, 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 and then go back. It's boom, like within 5 minutes, you're there on set. So it was easy.
So you do mention that you feel like you're on the cusp of something. I know what you're on the cusp of.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Let me know.
Well, it's being local. So your show is a lot of Winnipeg stories. So tell me about your show and keeping it local and broadcasting to an entire internet. You could have just made this show for the planet, but this is really a show about Winnipeg.
Well, and it's funny because I thought, because we're going to be across the board, anybody can listen or see us. I needed to be more international and not be so local focused. But if you're looking for stories, I can't fly to all over the world to find different people or to talk to them or know about them. So where else? You go to the same well, you go to the city that you live in. And it's actually, I wouldn't say forced me, but definitely I've broadened my circle of people. I mean, we all keep our own inner circle of close friends, but this has even made my scope of what's out there, who's out there more importantly, and who really has a good story to tell. Whereas before I kind of just relied on my same contacts. And so that's sort of, I guess, that in the way. To create content, you got to go and murder. You got to go out and meet people. That's what I've done. Yes. And I guess, yes, it has been local, but we try to put a broader kind of theme on our conversation. So everybody or somebody in another country can relate.
Yeah. And you don't have to be, from Winnipeg to be a part of the show. Sometimes you could be passing through Winnipeg. Sometimes it might be an issue that has to do with people in Winnipeg. I think a great example of that in one of my favorite episodes, and thank you very much for connecting me with Connie Wang, who, has been through a similar journey with us. And like, how am I going to be able to share my content with people?
Yeah, no, and she's fantastic. And I think, obviously the Asian connection, but I mean, really what twigged me is being, what is it, nearly famous or something like that. And you're Canadian, nobody cares. And then you go across the pond or across the border, you become famous. And then all of a sudden Canada loves you, or, your hometown loves you. So, but she's great. She's wonderful. And she's doing such incredible things now.
Now, I watched you on my local cable channel in, I think about the 2010s.
Yeah.
And the type of show was, local and in the community, but it also is very issue driven. And you haven't given any of that up.
No. And I think now I want to get more into that, and getting back to what I was speaking about earlier is talking about the uncomfortable things, or talking about things that nobody normally talks about, even when you're with your best friends or whatever like that. And they need to, because part and parcel of all that is all the stress people are under. Mental health, as we all know, has skyrocketed into different issues and, addiction. And when it boils down to it, it's just, they didn't know who to talk to, or, how to express their feelings. So that is kind of like the next step. And issues are the definite, I guess, catalyst, right? To start the conversation.
Yeah. Everything from mental health to, why is this not working for some people, to, disabilities, human rights themes. Also, it all seems to get interwoven, and you seem to be able to find, I don't want to say, is there anything you say no to?
I haven't yet, and I have to. But to be honest, I do a lot still, because my heart belongs in the arts and entertainment, performing arts and whatnot. And there are some, fringe ones that, and mostly because I don't really know a lot about it. Not that that scares me, but I just know, and too, when you kind of look at the broader picture of who you have in your show, what do you represent? There are just going to be the odd fringe things that just don't really jive with what you're doing. So no, I have not said no to anything, but I have been very kind of selective on, when it comes down to, I'd love to have you on the show.
Yeah. So, I mean, Rick Campanelli is, I think everybody in Winnipeg would know who he is, because he was, Rick the Temp, and he was on TV, he was on Entertainment Tonight and Much Music, and we all grew up with him. So yeah, that works. And then I think a few weeks later, I found myself listening to, the story behind history books, and I'm a history buff, and, what's that about? So I'm like, wow, I was wondering, is there anything she really doesn't say no to? But
well, you know what? You're right. And that was like one of my downfalls, especially when I was, on cable TV, is I never could say no. And
I think if you're on cable TV, you're not supposed to say no, right? It's community access.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The market, on my perspective, pretty saturated with podcasts, videocasts, whatever. What is the next step, or where do you think we are all going to go? Because it's pretty much anybody can have a show.
So the answer to that is home. Where are you going to go? You're going to go home.
Oh.
So I look at what we're doing as it's like books. Nobody sits at home and says, well, the book market's saturated, I'm not going to write a book. You just go write a book. And for podcasts, well, if you look at the number of people who are actually releasing episodes actively, and you have a very active show, that number is really only 350,000 podcasts that release an episode in the last 30 days. That's not a lot compared to YouTube that is like accepting millions of videos every day. So it's not saturated. I think what people think is discoverability. So how do people find you? That's the hard part. And it used to be that I would find you in a store or, in the corner of a in a studio making content. And now it's online. And of course, now you're sort of up against everything else that's online. It's not just other podcasts. It's like all the other, now you're up against TikToks, Instagram Reels. And that's why I sort of encourage people to do that stuff and tell people who your guests are.
Yeah. No, and that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But, no, and I want to thank you. I mean, yes, it's 5 years and God knows I never thought that I would ever be doing this and where it's all going, where it has all been, where it's all going to go. But it's been a great ride and certainly meeting people along the way. That's the gem.
So when people meet you and you tell them that you have a show, what are they interested in? Do you tell them it's a podcast or do you tell them it's a YouTube show or it's video?
And it's interesting because people say, "Oh, you've got a podcast." All right. And I'm like, well, oh yeah, I do, but we're video. And, so people really pick up on that podcast thing. And too, more and more podcasts are turning to video anyways. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, many of your listeners are calling it a podcast.
Yeah.
And so even if you weren't on Apple, Spotify and other places, they would say, "Oh, you've got a podcast." And even though it's on YouTube, because people, I think, look at YouTube and people talking to microphones like we are now, leads them to believe that, oh, this is a podcast.
Yeah. It's amazing. Oh, but, no, it's been very interesting too on how people get their content. And I think that also kind of has set alarm bells in me too, because people obviously look to the internet and all the different social media platforms for their information. Because we all know that the the 6 o'clock newscast, very few watch. Or, so I think, and I don't know, maybe you can correct me. Do you feel a little bit more like keeping an eye on sort of the content that you do produce or,
I'm just lucky to get it out there. If I can put it out, I think that's a victory unto itself.
Yeah.
But I am worried. I'm worried about no 6 o'clock news, or at least access to some form of news. Boy, you've got news channels that are 24/7, but there's nothing really local.
No.
There's nobody sort of amalgamating us like the stuff that you do. Does it air? Oh, we're going to put it on in the morning and we're going to meet some sort of requirement for the government. It's, yeah. And so, I do feel for some of these broadcasters who, want to connect to the community, but it costs money and it costs time and it costs people. And they might not be able to see the price of it, but I can tell you that after 426 episodes, that, you've got a library full of stories, Winnipeg stories eventually. So there is something to it. It's just hard to find people to invest in it.
Yeah. But, no, I mean, we'll keep on going until, the ship doesn't want to sail anymore, so to speak. That's,
or until all the stories are completed.
Yes, I'm done here. There's no more stories to be told here in Winnipeg.
But the city as a whole keeps churning out story after story after story. Because I remember in 2018, I think we spent a little bit of time perhaps talking about, should we open up Portage Avenue? And went through a lot of the debates and the discussion as a city. And yet all of a sudden overnight, I think we're going to open it up now. So the stories keep giving.
Oh, no, it's pretty crazy. But no, it's I think, the whole internet and being virtual not only has it, meant that you can do so many more stories locally, but also beyond borders. And that's pretty cool as a podcast. And then you see your reach into different countries and to, the demographic and stuff like that too. It really is amazing.
Recently, you did a 3-part series on the 40th anniversary of Rumors. And Rumors is a pretty special place. It's a comedy club. It is located up on Corden, I believe, Avenue in Winnipeg. But Jerry Seinfeld has played there. A lot of famous people have played there.
For sure.
Comedian friend of mine, Sugar Sammy, loves opening up his tour at Rumors. It's a it's a smaller size room, but Winnipeg's a great place to do some comedy.
Yeah. Well, anybody that can survive 40 years in anything, let alone comedy, is doing really well. And they're going like gangbusters now too. And I think the best thing was obviously the end of COVID, bringing people together, making people laugh. I got to meet, some of the comedians and just a really, really good bunch of people that, just love to come to Winnipeg. They say that we have the best audiences. They love Rumors. They love Tyler and his staff. And it's really heartwarming in a way.
When you look ahead to 2025, what are you looking forward to in terms of subject matter or bringing people on? What stories need to be told in 2025 on your show?
What's interesting because I'm working on something new for January. And I always wanted, and she always will be, a safe platform for anyone. Obviously, of course, I support women and the BIPOC community, women in the BIPOC community. That was always at the forefront and it always will be. But going beyond that, getting people to open up and talk about their feelings on issues, on things that matter, and not only matters to the general public, but matters to them. And I think we, as human beings, and the way we've been programmed, our brains only last for 90 seconds. And then something will distract you, your phone, you see something, or your brain flips and, I gotta do that. I forgot to do that. To have those conversations where you can bring the listener in. And for me, because I'm visual, having things shot in a different way, where it's just not a two-way, a face and then a face and then a face. It's actually where you're a fly in the wall and you're listening to these two people connect and talk, but you're invisible, like a fly in the wall, listening to their conversation. So, those are some of the things that I want to try to do. It just has a different feel. And I guess maybe that's what I'm looking for too, is a different feel to a conversation. What is a conversation anymore, really? And finding those true friendships. Friendship, I think, is going to be my buzzword, I guess, because I don't want to use empowerment anymore. I don't want to use empathy. And I know we know all about it, but friendship. And what does that mean? So that could be something, a series, I don't know. Because as grown adults, it's like you and me, making close friends, it's hard now, right?
Yeah, is that an age thing or the era?
I think it's both. I really do.
Yeah, because like you just turned 40 and I'm in my 50s. So I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah. You still get a buzz out of doing things live because, Wednesday night, 7:00. Yeah.
I do. There's just that something, and too, any kind of live event is because boom, you're on. And if you screw up, well, you just have to keep going because you can't stop and say, okay, do over. And the fact being is that it's done, right? When you say goodbye, thank you for joining us, boom, show's done.
But you don't have to do it live. Like you could just record it like I do.
Yeah, no. And then I was thinking, girl, why are you going through all this angst of doing something live? But yeah, that's the TV in me too. That's all.
Tracy, continued success with I Like Hue. I appreciate the work that you do. And it's great. Congratulations on this podcast, like 425 plus episodes, and looking forward to a great 2025.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to You May Also Like. You may also like our website at youmayalsolike.net. The show is produced by Evan Serminski and built for your ears by everyone at the Sound Off Media Company.